Okay, so let us see once again. Enable show run. So I'm having the configuration, yesterday's configuration. What I will do, I will remove this configuration. I will just reload the router, reload R1 and R4. Okay, now I'm on R1. Do show IP protocols. Okay, I'm running OSPF1. I've advertised all the network in OSPF. Show run. Do show run. There is no GRE tunnel or anything. There is no GRE or anything. I am running OSPF. I advertise two things. So first, what I will do, I will create a tunnel. Interface tunnel 1. I'll say the IP address of the tunnel is 192.168.0.1, which is having the subnet mask as 252. I want only two IP addresses, so I'm taking the subnet mask as 252. Okay, tunnel source is my Ethernet 0/0, and tunnel destination is my 198.51.100.2 exit. Same configuration I will do on R4 also. Enable config T config T. I'll say interface tunnel 1 IP address 192.168.1. Sorry, 0.2. Then tunnel source is my 198.51.100. Or I can say Ethernet 0/2, and my tunnel destination is 192.0.2.1 exit. Okay, now I can see show IP interface brief. I can see my tunnel is up. I have formed a GRE tunnel. My tunnel is up. Okay, then router OSPF1. I'll say network 192.168.0.03 area 0. Okay, then on R1, router OSPF1, I'll say network 192.168.0.0.0.0.3 area 0. Okay, now I can see the adjacency. So IP OSPF neighbors. See, on router 1, I have a neighborship with R4 router, and the neighborship is formed with the help of tunnel 1. I have formed the neighborship with R4, and the neighborship is formed with the help of tunnel 1. So we have done the basic configuration of this thing GRE. Now we will do the mapping. We will configure ISEC MP. So crypto ISEC MP policy. I will give any number to the policy. Okay. Then I will say encryption type I have to use is AES. Okay, encryption type is AES. Authentication type is pre-share key. Okay, and pre-share key with group number 2. Group number will specify that how strong is the algorithm. Okay, how strong is the algorithm. Group 2. So I have created the ISEC-MP policy and I have selected the encryption for policy is AES encryption and the authentication will be a pre-share key. Okay, then I will create a key, crypto ISEC-MP key. I will say the key is Cisco and the address is 0.0.0.0.0.0.0.0. Then I will say crypto IPsec transform set. I will create a transform set. I will give the name of the transform set as 1. Then I will select the authentication of this transform set. Okay, so the authentication will be ESP AES. ESP AES authentication. What is ESP? I've explained you what is ESP. When I was explaining you the modes, I've explained you what is ESP, encapsulation security protocol. Okay, which sorry, payload, not protocol. Which security payload will be used? So I will be using AES encryption. Okay, then what will be the algorithm that you will be using? Which algorithm? So I will be using uh, ESP SHA HMAC. I'll be using ESP SHA HMAC, ESP transform using HMAC authentication. Okay, ESP transform using HMAC authentication. Then I will select the mode as transport, exit. Then I'll create the access list, IP access list extended CCNP. Okay, permit GRE any exit. Then I will map this crypto with VPN. Crypto map, I will say VPN 10. This is the name of the mapping. This is the name of the mapping VPN and any sequence number of the map entry. So I will give 10 as my sequence number. Okay. So I have given 10 means I have to map the policy. Which policy? Policy number 10. And the policy is of ISEC MP, IPsec ISEC MP. Okay, then what I have to do, I have to match the match address that is given in CCNP. Okay, then set the transform set Cisco 1. Transform set will be Cisco 1. Then the IP address will be set peer, you can say on R1 the peer will be 198.51.100.2. Exit. Then interface Ethernet 0/0. I will say crypto map VPN. That's it. The same thing I will do on R4 also. I will say crypto ISEC MP policy 10. Then I will say encryption type is AES. Authentication type is pre-share key and group is 2. Group is 2. Then I will say crypto ISEC MP key is my Cisco and the address to the key is any address. Then crypto IPsec IPsec, crypto IPsec transform set. The transform set name is Cisco 1 and it is using ESP AES and ESP SHA HMAC. Okay. Then mode transport. Mode is transport exit. Then I will create access list over here, access list extended CCNP. Then I will say permit GRE any exit crypto map VPN 10 IPsec ISEC MP. Then match address CCNP. Then set transform set as Cisco 1, set peer as 192.0.2.1, exit interface Ethernet 0/2, crypto map VPN, crypto map VPN. Okay. Now if I verify the command show crypto ISEC MP association, security association. See, I will get an association over here. I'm getting an association. The destination is this, and my source is this. Okay, my source is this. I got an association. If I go on R1 and if I check show crypto ISEC MP SA. See, I'm getting an association over here. Okay, the destination over here is my this IP address. Okay, and my source is this IP address. The state is no state. This is in the idle state right now. Okay, it has been not created fully. See, now it has been created. Sorry, destination on R1. Show crypto show crypto IPsec association. See over here you can see local address is 192.0.2.1. Okay, and I formed a tunnel inbound AES SAS encryption type. Local is this, remote is this, remote endpoint of the tunnel is this IP address. Okay, transform set that is used is ESP. Transform set is using ESP AES authentication with SHA HMAC algorithm. SHA HMAC algorithm. Okay, status is active over here. So this is we have formed a neighborship. You can see over here. Show IP OSPF neighbors. So I will get a full neighborship with my R4 router, and the neighborship it is with tunnel, and I have secured this tunnel with IPsec security protocol. IPsec protocol. I have secured these things with IPsec security protocol. Okay, so we have uh, established a GRE tunnel, GRE over IPsec tunnel, you can say. Okay, we have established a GRE over IPsec tunnel. Got it? Any doubt? Okay. So we can move to the next topics now. So yesterday we have seen some small topics regarding network virtualizations. Okay. And we have seen some small topics. So today we will see what is the difference between on-premises and cloud. What is the difference between on-premises and cloud? Okay. So this is my, you can say on-premises or cloud. So you can say for many years, the companies have had very large rooms. You can say they had very large rooms where they had maybe raised floors with HVAC, you can say servers, and lots of power and redundant power and racks of servers. Okay, but it is very difficult for us to maintain large number of data center in our racks and all the things in our enterprise building. Okay, so it is, you can say there's lot of expense involved in maintaining the power and the servers themselves. Okay, so what the lot of enterprises are not doing, they are migrating, having the data centers on site or on premises, they are migrating those centers to the cloud. Okay, if the data center is on premises, what they are doing, they are migrating the data center on the clouds. Okay, maybe you can say the partner with a cloud provider, they partner with a cloud provider, you can say such as Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, or you can say they can use virtual servers up in the cloud. Okay, so this Amazon, uh, Microsoft, and Google provide us virtual servers. Okay, they are having physical servers. Okay, and we can store our data securely on their servers and we can get access at any time. Okay, so now one design question that comes in our mind, if uh, if we do move to the cloud with our data, now the question arises, how do we access the data securely? How do we access the data securely? So what we can do, we can use some internet thing. Internet. So internet is not secure. So what I can do in internet, I can use something known as VPN. Internet, I can use something known as VPN. So where we will be applying some encryption of our data. Okay, now if anybody intercepts the data, they are not going to be able to read it because it's all encrypted data now. It's all encrypted data. So this is one option you can take if we want to access the data securely over the cloud. So internet is one option. In internet, we can use some VPN technologies. Now another option besides using the internet, you can say, is to use some sort of private WAN networks, wide area connections, you can say. Now the examples can be MPLS or Metro Ethernet lines. Okay, now these all are the things that we can do to get the data securely. Okay, we can do to get the data securely. Now we will see some design consideration for on-premises and cloud. Okay, we will see some design consideration, what all things we can have. So the first consideration, with a cloud deployment, there is no need to maintain local redundant power and hardware. See, you will be not needing local power or redundant servers on local site in the enterprise network if you are moving to cloud design. Okay, with cloud deployment, you pay for the resource usage instead of purchasing physical hardware. So you don't need to purchase any physical hardware, just whatever you are using, you will pay for that. Okay, you can say we don't have to go out and buy massive servers and racks. We don't have to use floor space in the building. Okay, these things are our considerations when we are taking a cloud design, when you are using a cloud design. Okay, and instead of necessarily buying a server that we might do, we can just have a logical server, and we can use resources, and we can pay for this that resources only. Okay, understood. Now, on-premises deployment, it might be easier to meet compliance requirements. Okay, compliance requirements, you can say where I can take backups. Okay, and every often I have to take the backup of the data, and we can say, or we got physical servers physically secured. You can say. So these all things we need to consider if I'm using on-premises deployment. With an on-premise deployment, it might be easier to maintain a good user experience. I'm having a good user experience because we can control the bandwidth coming into our site. What we can do? We can control the bandwidth that is coming into our site. Now we don't really have that much control of the cloud provider. If I'm using a cloud design, I am not having any control, much control for the cloud provider. Okay, now, if we are using this type of deployment, on-premises deployment, we can use, you can say, monitor better performance if things are on site. Okay, understood. So these are some considerations that we can do. Many deployments called hybrid deployments combine both on-premises and cloud deployments. Okay, so this is a combination of both the deployments, cloud and on-premises deployments. Okay, understood. So these are the design consideration that we need to see when we are going to build an on-premises or a cloud storage, you can say. Got it? Now we can have redundant cloud provider, you can say. Redundant cloud provider. Okay, what we can do, suppose we peer with the inter cloud exchange. We will peer with an inter cloud exchange, and we will just peer with the inter cloud exchange, and the inter cloud exchange will be paired with all the cloud provider 1, cloud provider 2, cloud provider 3. Now I just decided, because of the rate increase, that I want to switch from one cloud provider to another cloud provider. Okay, so now it's this his responsibility, intercloud exchange responsibility, to take the peering of cloud one, close the peering for cloud one, and make the connection with cloud two provider. Okay, that's a benefit of an intercloud exchange, and that's, you can say, we can use uh, on if you are using a cloud design. Okay, if you are using a cloud design. Now, why we need this multiple cloud providers? Why we need multiple cloud providers? See,
For different geographical locations, it will be faster.
yes, you can say it is one thing, but you can say for a large enterprise, you can say selecting between different cloud providers, it will be very difficult for them. Okay, because uh, suppose cloud one provider is giving me some bandwidth and it is costing me some 8 MB, something, any cost it is giving me. Okay, the cost is something 8, and over here the cost is something 10, and over here the cost is 11. Now in future, what I did, if I am peering with intercloud exchange, and intercloud exchange will be having peers with multiple cloud providers. Okay, now suppose in future, now at the current time I am having a peer with this cloud provider, okay, my enterprise. Now in future, suppose this became 18, the cost increased for this cloud provider, it became 18. Now it is the responsibility of intercloud exchange to switch on to another cloud provider, to switch on to another cloud provider. So this will benefit in me, this will benefit my organization or my enterprise in cost, in cost, and without looking into all the things like the cost, the bandwidth, what all the plans, and what are the plans of this service provider, cloud provider. My intercloud exchange will do all the things for me. Okay,
So this
my inter sorry,
cost as an actual cost or like
no, not the
bandwidth
link
and
cost, the
just yeah,
money, the
actual
money
cost,
that I have
money,
to pay,
money. Yeah.
the
Okay.
money that I have to pay. Okay, now this will be more flexible for me, this will be more flexible for me. Okay, for the enterprise this will be more flexible if I'm using intercloud exchange, intercloud exchange type of scenario. Got it? So this is a small topic that is given in our syllabus, difference between on premises and cloud design. Okay, so nowadays cloud designs are used more. Okay, because you have heard about AWS, Amazon Web Services. Okay, so Amazon is also providing web servers, okay, that you can use. You don't have to build a physical rack in your data center. What you can do, you can just buy, you can just pay them and you can just buy that thing, that servers. Okay, and they will be logically placed, they will be placed in some other location, maybe at Amazon's data center. Okay, and you, what you can do, you can just access that devices, you can make changes, you can build that racks as per your requirement. Okay, no one will stop you to do anything. It is same like our on-site racks, what we build in our data center. Understood? Any doubt? Okay, now the next topic is fabric capacity planning. Fabric capacity planning. Now we want to consider fabric capacity planning, and we can see when we talk about fabric, we are normally talking about the network interconnection inside a data center, the network interconnection between a inside a data center. So if I say earlier we consider a spine leaf design that we might have in a data center. Okay, where we have our servers connected to the leaf switches. These are my server, these are my servers, suppose these are connected to leaf switches, and the leaf and the different leaf switches, they are pushing data through spine switches. Okay, here are my spine switches. So this is my fabric, you can say this is a type of fabric. Okay, now let's say that we are trying to select an appropriate spine switch to handle the capacity, to handle the capacity of certain, you can say, number of leaf switches and certain number of servers. Now we are giving a spine switch a capacity that you can handle. So suppose 5 servers or 5 leaf switches. Okay, well, then we got some questions to ask. Okay, what are the questions? The questions are listed down over here. If we are giving some capacity to the spine switches, then how much data do we need to push through a data center switch? How much data we need to push through a data center switch? Now, if we are talking about a spine switch, we need to consider how many leaf switches we're connecting to and how much data is going to be flowing in that maximum from all these leaf switches. So if I'm considering one spine switch, how many leaf switches are connected in this? I have to consider that thing. Okay, first of all, if I'm going to the first question, then I have to say how many leaf switches are connected and what is the data, how much data is going to be flowing in that maximum from all of these leaf switches. Okay, now you can say we must be having some historical data also, historical data as well, that is stored in our data center devices, like we can say forecast what future bandwidth demands might be. Okay, so if we don't have the luxury of that all historical data, suppose we are not having the historical data, then what we can do, we could at least in the existing design, what we can do, we can counter over time. Okay, we can counter the overtime. Now here the next question arises, how long we going to keep this spine switches? How long are we going to keep this spine switches? For 3 years, for 4 years? Okay, so now over that time, we can say, do we anticipate the bandwidth demand? No. Are we using the uh, are we using the things properly? Okay, so how much, you can say, how much bandwidth is going to be pushed through a spine switch? Okay, now let us consider an example. I am going and I am taking a Nexus 700 series switch. Okay, and in this switch, if I consider the bandwidth, I can calculate the bandwidth by this formula. Okay, and I'm taking a Nexus 7000 series switches. Okay, and in this 18 switch slot are available. Okay, we are going to have couple of supervisor engines and rest of the slots are you can say going to be output or IO slots, input output slots. Okay, then the formula to calculate is given over here, switch bandwidth capacity. Okay, so we are going to see what is the inter slot switching capacity. What is the inter slot switching capacity? And you can say we will need to turn to the hardware documentation. If I say the switch capacity might be 550, I can consider 550 gigabits. Okay, 550 gigabits. Okay, 550 gigabits. If I go and consider, see, I have written over here 550 gigabits. Okay, so now, and then I have to multiply this with number of IO slots. So number of IO slots I will be considering, it is 16 IO slots. I am having 16 IO slots, input output slots. Now we will add this thing. We are going to add throughput. You can say throughput that we can get through the supervisor engine. Okay, see over here what I am saying, number of SE modules. SE modules. What is SE modules? Supervisor engine modules. Supervisor engine modules, and we are multiplying this supervisor engine modules with inter-slot switching capacity. So what I got, the capacity 550. So I'm multiplying this thing, and this is divided with, this is divided by 2. This thing is divided by 2. Why it is divided by 2? See, I'm dividing it by 2 because a supervisor engine is going to have half the capacity of a regular IO module. Whatever my supervisor module is there, supervisor engine is there, it is going to have the half capacity of the regular IO module. That is the reason I am dividing by 2. Okay. Now if I calculate 550 gigabits into 16, I get 8800 gigabits. Now if I multiply it by 2 and divide it by 2, then I will get 550 gigabits. So I have to add this thing. I will get 9350 gigabits per second. Okay. So you can say this is something 9.3 terabytes per second. 9.3 terabytes per second. Okay. Now my full duplex switch bandwidth capacity is 9350 into 2. Full duplex switch capacity. Okay. Full duplex switch capacity is whatever the switch capacity, normal switch capacity we got, into 2, means double. Why we have done double? Because you can say the full duplex where we are transmitting and receiving simultaneously. In full duplex we are transmitting and receiving simultaneously, so we have to take this number and multiply it by 2. Okay, so how much I got? I got 18.7 terabytes per second for this particular model of spine switch. Understood? So in this way we can calculate the fabric capacity planning. In this way we can plan our data center fabrics, the switches. Okay, so this is something known as fabric capacity planning. Okay. Now the next thing that we will see is redundant designs. Redundant designs. So if I say you redundant designs, what do you understand by redundant designs? So redundant designs, if I consider redundant designs, it can cost higher cost because redundant components I will be using, the switches, routers, you can say, and the power supplies, UPS generators. If I am using FHRP, first of redundancy protocol, I'll be needing two routers, so that if my one router, one gateway as two router as my gateway to one physical location. Okay, so if my one router goes down, then it will be using another router as the backup. So redundant design will cost higher. It will cost me higher. Okay. But I need redundancy in my network. Now, if I consider fault tolerance, what is fault tolerance? The ability of device to continue operation if one of its component fails. So now if I consider fault tolerance, suppose if I was having two router, my one router failed. Okay, my one router failed. This is my firewall, sorry. My firewall or my one router failed. Now what is the scenario? It might impact the performance because it will increase the complexity. How it will increase the complexity? Because the interconnection between the devices is very complex. If I'm having large enterprise network, the interconnection between devices, the interconnectivity between devices, fault tolerance is something you can say the ability of the device to continue operation if one of its component fails. Okay, so if I consider fault tolerance in redundant design, it will impact my performance. It will impact my performance. Also, it will increase the complexity of the device that is running. Okay, the device will get more complexity, okay, because it has to understand the roots. The design is very complex. See, this is my redundant design. Each device is connected with one another. This is my something enterprise design, enterprise network design, core layer, distribution layer, and access layer. Okay, these are my access layer switch, distribution layer switch, core layer switches. Got it? Now, same thing we can take an example of redundant design, as we can have our office and we can have two ISP connections. Okay, so what we can do, we can forward some packets from here and some packets from here. Now, if suppose my this link goes down, then I can still forward the, I still have the redundancy. I still have redundancy. It will increase my throughput. Okay, redundancy will increase my throughput. If my both the links are up, I can load balance the data. Or if my one link is down, still I can access the internet. Okay, so this is something, an example of redundant design. Okay, or if I go in the switching concept, the redundant design, we have some servers, okay, and in some types of servers, we are having multiple NIC cards, multiple NIC cards. So what we can do, we can form an NIC teaming, NIC teaming. What we can do, we can connect to each NIC cards the switch interface. Okay, so what it will do, it will give me redundancy. If my one link fails, I have another link. If my another link fails, it have another link, three links, four links. So with the help of NIC teaming, what I can do, I can make a team of NIC cards and I can connect it to a single switch. Now, if you remember the concept of ether channel, port aggregation, you can say, so I can have redundancy between two switches also. I can create a bundle, okay, and I can aggregate the ports, port aggregation ether channel, you can say. Now, in this, if my one link fails, I am still having the access because I am having redundant path. I am having redundant path. But if I am not creating port aggregation, spanning tree protocol STP will block all other links. It will just use one link at a time. Okay, so this is also a type of redundant design that we can use by using ether channel. By using ether channel. Okay, or what we can do, we can have multiple servers which with similar data, with same data, you can say. We can keep multiple servers with same data. What we can do, server load balancer. Okay, so here is a device which will load balance. Suppose any data is coming over here, what it will do, it will load balance the data to all the servers. So all the servers will be having similar type of data. Suppose my one link goes down, still I have the access to the resources. Still I have access to the resources. Reduces server load, provides redundancy. You can say this is known as cluster of servers. Okay, cluster of servers which are having same type of data. Got it? Redundant design. This is also one type of redundant design. Now, if I consider some backup storage, so what are the types of backup? If I am running an enterprise and I'm having a data center, then I need to consider backup. Just a second. Huh? So I need to have a backup of my data. I need to have a backup of my data. So how I can have the backup of my data? So the types of backup are, First one is full backup. Full backup backups all the data. So if I'm doing full backup, whenever my data, whatever my data is there, it will be fully backupped. Okay. Suppose I have done a backup on Monday. Okay. Then and on Wednesday I have done again. So what it will do, whatever the full backup it has done, again it will backup on Wednesday. If I'm using full backup, again it will backup the full data from start. Okay. Then we have something known as differential backup. Backup changes since last full backup. So if I take this example, I've done a backup on Monday night and now on Wednesday I'm doing another backup. So if I'm using differential backup, then what it will do, it will just back up the changes that have made between Monday and Wednesday. Whatever the changes has been made between Monday and Wednesday, it will not do full backup. Incremental backup. Backup backs up all changes since last full differential or incremental backup. Okay. Now, if I take the same example, now incremental update, incremental backup means suppose I have done a full backup on Monday night. Now on Wednesday, I have done a differential backup. Now on Thursday, I am doing an incremental backup. So what it will do, it will it will take the backup between this time between Wednesday and Thursday means whatever the backup is there, also it will take the full backup and differential backup. So incremental backup is something more complicated. The best practice is the last thing, snapshots. Backup backs up entire server including state information. So what we can do, we can take a image of the router, a snapshot you can say in networking term, it is known as a image of the server, and you can take the backup on the storage device or on any external device you can say. So the best practice is to take a snapshot of the entire server. Okay, this is the best practice and this is the practice that we use in our networking field. Understood types of backup? Now we have, if suppose we are having some disaster or anything, so we need to have disaster management in our redundant design. Okay, disaster management. So suppose I am having an enterprise data. So what I can do, I can use a cold site. What the cold site will be having? The cold site will be having power, HVAC, floor space, means it will be having servers. Okay, and it will be not having see physical, or you can say you don't have to buy any servers, you will be having cold sites. Okay, now in cold sites you can say it, I have what I have to do, I have to make a backup of all the things over here. Okay, I have to make a backup. Suppose on time to time I have to make a backup over here on cold sites. Okay, now the next thing I'm having a warm site. So warm site I'm having a server hardware with the help of these three power, HVAC and floor space. I'm also having a server hardware. Okay, now in server hardware what I have to do, on time to time I have to place backups and I have to clear the previous history. Okay, the best practice is to use hot site. Hot site, what hot site does, hot site will have server hardware with synchronized data. So whenever you make any change over here, it will be synchronized automatically with the hot site data center you can say, or servers. With the hot site servers, it will be automatically, so my hot site will be up to date. It does not have to be changed, it is up to date now, it is up to date now. Got it? So this consideration we can take in redundant designs. If we suppose if at any time any disaster happens, or any natural calamities happens. So for these things, we can have this redundant option: cold site, warm site, and hot site. Now we are having some points like service level agreements, SLA. What is SLA? The promise you make to your users about how long a system will be down in the event of disaster. So suppose if an disaster happened, then how much time it will take for the system to come up. So that is known as service level agreement, SLA. Okay, now it will consider two things: recovery time objective and recovery point objective. Recovery time objective, RTO, you can say the maximum amount of time a system will be offline after a disaster. Service level agreement will consider two things: RTO and RPO. Okay, so RTO means what will be the maximum time the system will be offline, and what is RPO means the maximum amount of data that can be lost due to the disaster. Okay, now how much data will be lost will be considered in RPO. So this is something service level agreement that we will make with the company or enterprise, you can say. So these are some redundant design conditions, or you can say uh, redundant designs options that we can take into consideration. Okay, understood? Any doubt till here? Okay, so the next thing that we will
No,
see, sorry,
no, sir, no doubt.
okay, the next thing that we will see is stateful switchover, SSO, stateful switchover. Now we will consider, suppose I'm having redundant paths. Okay, I'm having redundant paths. The first path is I'm having the first part is my routing protocol 1 and another is my routing protocol 2 for redundancy. Okay, so what it formed a neighborship with routing protocol 1. It formed a neighborship over here. Okay, now suppose if this goes down, then what will happen? The main issue is now if my failover falling over to a backup route, what will happen? It will reset the neighborship and it will form a new neighborship over here. It will reset the neighborship and it will form a new neighborship over here. So it is the main issue that once the neighborship is resetted, all the routes will should have to be learned again. Okay, and suppose some packets are traveling, then the packets will get dropped. So this is the main issue. Now what we can use, suppose my first link failed, then what I can use? I can use an SSO, stateful switchover. Okay, stateful switchover. What this stateful switchover will do? It will sync the config and state information. Whatever the configuration and state information is there, whenever this is up, it will sync the state and configuration information with another path, with the secondary path. Now this is having all the information about the config and state information. So whenever this link goes down, this will automatically form the neighborship with R2. This will automatically form the neighborship with R2. Now the second issue over here, we have used SSO, but then also we are having a issue. What is the issue? The packets might be dropped until the forwarding table is rebuilt. See, I have formed the neighborship, but my routing table should be built again. I have to build my routing table. I have to select the routes what all are the routes are there. I have formed the neighborship with the router, but still I need the this thing, uh, routes, routing table. So here is the second problem. So what I can do, I can use something known as non-stop forwarding, NSF. With SSO I can use NSF. So when I'm using NSF, what it will do, it will not only forward the config and state information, it will also forward the CEF. What is CEF? What is CEF? We have,
Cisco Express Forward.
yes. So whatever the forwarding table is there, it will forward that, it will also exchange that forwarding table with the secondary route. Okay, makes the routing information maintained by CEF available to the backup route processor also. Okay, in this way we can form a stateful switchover SSO, stateful switchover SSO with the help of NSF. Understood? Any doubt?
No, sir.
So these were some small topics, okay, that I have to complete these topics. Okay, small topics are there. Then we can move to a new topic. See, you must be aware of that NAT process. Okay, what is natting? So what is natting? What is natting?
Translating an IP address from one pool to another.
Why we need?
Primarily to conserve IPv4 address
See,
Yes,
we
and
public
for
to
security.
private, private to public.
yes. See, with the private IP address, I cannot go over the internet. So NAT is a method to translate private address into public address. Okay. Whenever I need to go over the internet, I cannot go with my private IP addresses. I cannot go with my private IP addresses. I will go with my public IP address. What are the advantages? It conserves IP address. It provides you security as it hides the private IP address. So if it is hiding the private IP address, then my system is in secure. My system is secure. Correct? The third thing is it prevents address overlapping. It prevents address overlapping. Now, types of NAT. See, natting is the same concept that we have learned, or the same concept we are having in our this CCNP syllabus also, whatever we have learned in our CCNA. Okay, so if I go and if I say encode, okay, I'm having see configure and verify NAT pat. Okay, so NAT is something network address translation, pat is port address translation. So I have to configure NAT and pat. Okay, so we have seen in IP services, we have seen this HSRP, VRRP. Okay, NTP is remaining. NTP is also same that we have studied in our CCNA. Just a security function has been added. I think so. Varun and Dade Hari have explained you the security functions also, as I remember. I don't know surely if I have explained you or not, but we are having the same thing in the NAT and PAT, we are having the same thing. Okay, the syslog server, this is also the same, the SNMP and syslog, nothing has been changed. Okay, so diagnose network problem using tools such as debugs, conditional debugs, traceroute we have already seen, ping we know, SNMP, syslog. Okay, so these many things are there that are same as our, see this line password protection, AAA server. Okay, access list we have already seen. Okay, now we will see COP. Then we have some security protocols we have already seen in wireless pre-shared key. We will see web authentication and EAP. Okay, then these are the components of security, network security. Then we will be having this last chapter. Okay, so we will be completing in 2 weeks our syllabus. Within 2 weeks we will be completing the syllabus. Okay, so
So sorry to interrupt, sir. We done
sorry,
multicast IP service.
we have not done multicast.
Okay.
These protocols we have not done. PIMP and IGMP version 2, version 3 we have not done. See, these are some small topics. We have just description. We don't have to
Go
configure
in
or
depth,
something.
sparse, dense
Yes,
mode, and all that stuff.
yes. See, the description is of NTP is also a description. We don't need to configure. Already we have seen FHRP. Okay, first of redundancy protocols. See, here it is HSRP and VRRP, but I have explained you GLBP also.
Correct.
Correct. So I am giving you in-depth knowledge. See, I take time. I know I take time, but I give you in-depth knowledge about all the things. Okay. So the new things that uh, are there in the syllabus, that is automation part and wireless, I will try my best to go in depth. Okay. But as you know that these are some new things, so peoples in the network environment also are not knowing much about these new things. Okay, automation. Wireless is not new, but some concepts of wireless is also new. Okay, so I will try my best in automation. Okay, I will try my best. See, we have interpret Python, we will having a small script, then we will construct a valid JSON encoded file. Then we have some description about the APIs, data center, RESTconf, NESTconf, DNA center. Then EM applet we will see a construct an EM applet, okay, for troubleshooting the data. Then we will compare agent versus agentless orchestration, just such Chef, Puppet, Ansible, and Salt Stack. So in the last automation part also we are just having some configuration part 1, 2. This is something interpreting basic Python means I have to give you the details about basic Pythons. Okay, how it works, what are the components, and what all are the scripts that are used. So I'm only having two things that I have to do in automation configuration. Rest all the things are theory. Okay, if you select N auto, if you select N auto automation as your this is your core exam.
Yes.
Okay, then N auto will be your optional paper. So if you select N
Yeah,
auto, then you will be having more in-depth knowledge about that thing.
I think I have done that. So, but there is some other
So you have done N auto.
instructor for that, right? That's what you said, right? No,
Sorry,
I'm going to do that. Sorry, I'm going to do that
you're going to do that.
with
Yes.
Okta networks.
So you have already enrolled it.
Yeah. But there's some another
Instructor.
instructor. I'm asking, or will it?
See,
Who will be the instructor?
Which one is that?
enterprise
N
network.
auto,
N auto, N auto.
Oh,
EN
okay.
auto.
Yeah, that's what I want to do.
So if
Yeah,
I go,
because networking. These are all new topics that we need to learn. N
yes,
auto
see,
and SD-WAN.
I can
So
teach
that
an
is
auto.
why
I can teach an auto
but
as
who is
well.
going to teach it? Is it going to be you, sir, or someone else?
Sorry.
Is it going to be you?
See, I can teach, but I right now I don't know that I will be teaching or some other trainers because we have three trainers for automation. Okay. So I right now I don't know whether I will be teaching or some other trainer will be taking the batch. Okay, because they can give me
Okay,
the
because
CCNP Encore batch, new Encore batch also. So I right now don't know who will be the
because I have enrolled for N auto and
SD-WAN.
SD-WAN because
Yeah, you have
that's
told
two
me.
two topics I wanted to do. Yeah.
So in SD-WAN, we are having one trainer only. That is his certified
Yes. Yeah.
SD-WAN trainer. Okay. So I was just showing you the training courses, certification training. Why it is not working?
Interested in automation and like Python and stuff like that. So that's why. Or I want to learn it, I should say.
Yeah, it is very good. Python things are very good. You should learn. See, if I go in the associate level, okay, that we have done. So associate level we are having CCNA and Cisco certified DevNet associate, and we are having CyberOps associate. So these are my associate level certifications. Now if I go in my certification professional level, whatever we are doing right now, so professional level I am having these all professional things. So I can select enterprise. I have selected enterprise. Then after enterprise, right now we are doing this thing. This is my N auto 300/435, implementing automation for Cisco enterprise solutions. Okay. So now if I go and if I see exam topics,
Can you scroll up for a minute?
just a second. So these are my exam topics 300/435 N auto. Okay, these are my chapters. So I'm having utilize common API, add, clone, push, commit, difference, this all things. Okay. Then in the first chapter, I'm having interpret Python script containing data types, functions, classes, conditions, looping, if loop, for loop, if else, while loop, all the things. Okay. Then in the second chapter, I'm having uh, this interpret Yang module tree generated per RFC. Okay. Then in the third network device programmability, I am having configure using RESTconf API using utilizing Python request library. Okay. Then utilize Ansible to configure an iOS XE device. Then configure subscription for model driven telemetry on an iOS XE device like CLI, NetConf, and RESTconf. So I'm having much in-depth things in this, and some SD-WAN and SD Access DNA Center are also
So
added.
that last page, if you go one page back, for some reason I thought, do we need an CC like associated or DevNet before doing this?
No,
Okay.
see, the thing is that if you're doing an auto, this is something CCNP Enterprise, you will get a CCNP Enterprise certification. Okay. And also you are a Cisco certified DevNet professional. Okay. You are doing a Cisco DevNet professional, you can say 30% you will get a knowledge about DevNet professional. Okay.
Okay, but they have DevNet associate also, right? So we don't need associate
No,
to
no, no,
do
you don't
this.
need associate.
Okay, okay.
See over here, if I go,
No, I understand. I understand. I'm just saying knowledge of at least like that part, even though it's like knowledge of what they
exam
teach in associate level.
preparation. So I have not logged in, so I have to log in over here. So this is something an auto part. So we are not having much details about this thing. So we were on NAT, right? NAT. So NAT is something similar, same you can say as our CCNA level NAT. So now types of NAT are static NAT and dynamic NAT. So what is static NAT? One-to-one address mapping. One-to-one address mapping. So suppose I'm having 10 users, then I will be having 10 public IP addresses for this 10 users. If I'm having 10 users in my company, I will be having 10 public IP addresses for this 10 users. Correct? I will map them manually 192.168.1.1, 50.0.0.1, 192.168.1.2, 50.0.0.2. We need to map them manually. Every private IP needs one registered public IP address. Every private IP need one registered public IP address. This is something my static NAT. What is the disadvantage of static NAT? Suppose I am having 100 users. I'm having 100 users. So I need, first of all, I need 100 IP addresses. I need 100 IP addresses. Leave 100 public IP addresses for now. I have to write 100 lines of codes. I have to write 100 lines of code, each for one user, each for one user. So it will be very difficult and have to manage these things. So it will be very difficult for me to keep the track of all these things. Okay, so this is something disadvantage of my static NAT. Then the second type of NAT is dynamic NAT. Many to many address mapping. Many to many address mapping. Okay, now what we will do, we don't need to map all IP address manually. They are assigned dynamically. Okay, they are assigned dynamically. What I will do, I will create a pool of IP address. Suppose from 1.1 to 1.100. I will create a pool of IP address. You have to use the pool of IP address between these addresses. Okay, so whoever comes will take the IP address, will take the first and second, third, first come first basis. Okay, so still I am if I am having 100 users, then I will be needing 100 IP addresses. Still that drawback is there over here. Still that drawback is there over here. The manual configuration drawback has been removed, but still I am in need of 100 IP addresses. I'm in need of 100 IP addresses. Okay, so to overcome these two things, we have something known as port address translation, many to one, many to one. We will have only one public IP address, and one public IP address will be mapped to all other addresses. It will be mapped to all other private IP addresses, all the private IP addresses. Only one public IP address we can have. Okay, how we can differentiate private IP addresses? We can differentiate private IP addresses through port numbers. And how many users I can connect? I can connect 60,000 users and they can use one public IP address at a time. 60,000 users can use one public IP address. Isn't it good? 60,000 users are using one public IP address at a time. Okay, so what I can do, I can have Let me check if I'm having any data saved. The configuration. Or I can take this example. I've already given the IP addresses, so I have to change the IP addresses over here. So what I can do, I can take a completely new scenario. Okay, this is this thing. More action, stop all nodes. Close tab. New NAT. Okay. So what I will do, I will take a scenario where I will take some router. I will take IOL device. I will take two routers. R1 serial ports will be 1. I've taken two routers over here. We'll connect these two routers with the serial link, serial 1/0 and 1/0. Save. So this is something my local company's router, and this is my ISP's router. Okay. Now I'll take some switches. IOL device, two switch, L2, 2, 2, 2, 2, L2. I'll say switch. I'll say save. I've taken, sorry, edit, delete. Node, IOL, switch, L2, two switches, images, switch, save. I will take some PCs. Number of PCs I will take 4. The same topology that we have done in our CCNA level. I will be using the same topology. Okay. Now I will give IP addresses to these routers and the devices. So over here I will be using 192.168.1.network/24 1.network, and these will be my servers, some servers that are kept on, you can say, over the internet, some servers that are kept over the internet, 200.1.1.0/24. These are my servers that are some kept over the internet, and over here I will be having a private IP address, you can say 100.1.1.1. Okay, 100.1.1/8, sorry, 1.1, not 1.network. Okay, I am giving /8 to give like this. Now I will give IP address to PCs and all the nodes. IP 192.168.1.1, 255.255.255.0, then 192.168.1.100. Then I will say I will take the console of this. IP 192.168.1.2, 255.255.255.0, 192.168.1.100. Take the console of router. No, enable config terminal interface fast Ethernet 0/0, Ethernet 0/0, IP address 192.168.1.100, 255.255.255.0, no shut. Then I will say interface. What is my serial interface? My serial interface is 1/0. Serial 1/0. I will say IP address 100.1.1.1/8. No shut. Okay. Then I'll go on R2. This is my ISP's router. ISP's router. Enable config T interface serial 1/0, IP address 100.1.1.1 to 255.0.0.0, no shut. I will say interface Ethernet 0/0 IP address 200.1.1.100/24, no shut. Okay, I will give the IP address to this PCs also. IP 200.1.1.1. These are my servers that are kept over the internet. So we don't have the live scenario. So we are just configuring servers manually. Okay, we are giving private IP address, public IP address to the servers so that we can check the connectivity. IP 192, 200.1.1.2. I've given over here one, right? 255.255.255.0, then 201.1. Just a second. 200.1.1.100. Checking for duplicate IP address. Now what I will do, I'll check the connectivity ping 200.1.1.100. I'm reachable to my gateway. So my connectivity is fine. Now what I will do, I will configure a static route. I will configure a default route on my R1, as we have studied that whenever I need to go to any unknown location, I have to configure a default route over here, and on R2 I will create a static route. Okay, I'll create a static route. Now I will be using some 50 dot network. I'll be using 50 dot network, 50.1.1.1, 0, and slash value will be 24 as my public IP range, public IP as my public network, you can say. I'll be using 50 dot as my public network. Okay, 50.1.1.0. So what I will be doing, I will be giving a static route over here, a default route over here. So I will configure static default route on R1. I will say IP route. If you want to go anywhere with unknown location, unknown subnet mask, go to 100.1.1.2. Go to 100.1.1.2. And on R2, I will configure a static route. I will say IP route. If you receive any packet from 50.1.1.0 network with subnet mask is 24, then you have to send it to 100.1.1.1. Got it? Show IP route. I've configured a static route. Okay. Now I've configured routing. So can I ping from here to my server? I can reach from my router to my server. From R1, I can reach to my server. But if I try to ping from here, ping 200.1.1.1. See, I'm not getting the reply. I'm not getting the reply. Why? Because I am pinging from a private IP address and I am going to a public IP address. So I cannot reach a public IP address, okay, without having a NAT process. So first of all, we will be seeing NATing, static NAT, how to configure static NAT. So to configure static NAT, I will say IP NAT static, or sorry, IP NAT inside source static. IP NAT inside source static, and 192.168.1.1 will be assigned 50.1.1.1, and 1.2 will be assigned 50.1.1.2. Okay, got it? Now I will implement this thing on the interface. I will implement this thing on the interface. So on my Ethernet interface that is connected to my LAN on this E/0, I will say IP NAT inside, IP NAT inside, whatever traffic is coming inside the network, inside the LAN interface, it should be performed NAT. And on the serial interface, I will say IP NAT outside, whatever traffic is going outside the network, you have to perform NATing. You have to perform NATing. Show IP NAT translation. See, I have made a manual NAT. Okay, I have manually configured NAT 50.1.1.1 for 192.168.1.1 and 50.1.1.2 for 192.168.1.2. Correct? I have manually configured these things. Now, what is inside global and what is inside local? Inside local means our private IP address. Inside global means for this private IP address, what is the public IP address that will be used? For this private IP address, what will be the public IP address that will be used? That is known as inside global. Outside local and outside global will be almost same. Okay, so how to verify now? I will go over here and I will say ping 200.1.1.1. See, now I can reach the server over the internet on the private IP address. I can reach the servers over the internet. Understood? See, if I go on the router again and if I check show IP NAT translation, see, I am getting outside local address is my 200.1.1.1. Outside global address is also same. See, it is same in our scenario because we have configured only one server. Okay, it can be different in other scenarios also. So for 50.1.1.1, this is my public IP address for 192.168.1.1. Understood? Any doubt in static NAT?
No, sir.
Okay. So now we have configured static NAT. What we will do, we will remove this configuration, NAT configuration. We will configure dynamic NAT. No IP NAT inside, no IP NAT for this also. Okay, I've removed the NAT configuration. I'm not able to ping. I'm not able to ping my network. Okay, so netting is not there over here. Now what I will do, I will configure dynamic NAT. So what is the configuration for dynamic NAT? I told you that we have to configure a pool. We have to configure a pool in dynamic NAT. So first I have to create an access list. Access list, any number I can give, numbered access list. Access list 1, I will say permit 192.168 one dot network with the wildcard bits 0.0.0.255. Okay, this is something I have created an access list. Permit 192.168 one dot network with the wildcard bits as 0.0.0.255. Then I will say IP NAT pool. The name of the pool is CCNP. Name of the pool. Then what it is asking? Start IP address. Start IP address. Uh, 50.1.1.1 start IP address, end IP address 50.1.1.10. Okay, this is my end public IP address. What will be the net mask? 255.255.255. See, if I give over here, it is asking me for the net mask. Net mask is 255.255.255.0. Okay, IP NAT pool. I have created a pool and I have given the start IP address of the public IP address range. I have given start and end IP address with the subnet mask value as 24. Correct? Now I will say I will assign this pool to the access list. Okay, I will say IP NAT inside source list is my CC. Source list is my 1. and my pool name is CCNP. IPNAT inside source list is 1 and pool name is CCNP. Now we are having the same configuration. The if I give do show run, I am having the interface configuration will be same. Let me check again IPNAT inside, and on serial interface it will be IPNAT outside. Okay, so I've configured this thing. Now what I will do, I'll say clear IPNAT translation star, show IPNAT translation. So I'm not having any translation because I have not manually configured anything. So what I will do, I will try to reach the network. See, I can reach the network from PC to the server. I can move over the internet. Now if I see show IPNAT translation, see, it has been assigned a net, dynamically it has been assigned and public IP address. Dynamically it has assigned a public IP address. Got it? 50.1.1.1. It has been assigned a public IP address dynamically. Okay. If I try to ping from another this thing, another PC 200.1.1.2, I'll be able to ping, and if I check the NAT translation, show IP NAT translation, see, it is dynamically assigned another IP address. Dynamically assigned another IP address. What I will do, I will clear the NAT translation. So IP NAT translation, the NAT translation has been cleared. Now what I will do, I will ping from here first, from PC6. Then I will check my NAT translation. See, it has been assigned the same IP address. It has been assigned the same IP address. Got it? This is something dynamic NAT we have created, but still, if we are having 100 users, I will be needing 100 private, for 100 private IP addresses, we will be needing 100 public IP addresses. So, which is not feasible. So, what we can do, we can have something known as PAT, port address translation. Port address translation. So, what we can do, we will remove the access list, we will remove all the configurations from here. So, config T, I will say, okay, so I have to remove the access list first, then I will remove this. Okay, I will remove this. Dynamic mapping in use. You want to delete all entries? Yes. Then I will remove this thing. If I go and check show run, I should not have any configuration, no access list, nothing. Just my interface are configured with NAT. Okay. If I go and verify from my PC, I will be not able to ping. I will be not able to ping the servers. Now to configure PAT, the configuration is same as my dynamic NAT. What I have to do, I have to create an access list 2. Okay. Then I will say permit 192.168 one dot network with wildcard bits 255. Okay. Then I will create a pool IP NAT pool. Pool name will be CCCC 4C. Okay. Start IP address will be 50.1.1.1 end IP address will be also same. If I want to configure PAT, I have to give this start IP and end IP same. The net mask will be 255.255.255.0. Okay. Then IP NAT inside.
Sir, one small doubt, sir.
Yes. Yes, you can
In
ask.
port address translation, yes, sir. Even a single laptop, for example, can use many services like Chrome and WebEx and etc.
Yes.
So they might be needing uh, multiple ports for that.
No. Yes, they will be needing
So
multiple ports for it.
technically, theoretically, we can't use. Yeah, so theoretically, we can't use up all the port numbers, all the 60,000 port numbers. No, sir. So, for example, a single person might be needing 10 or 20 ports, for example.
Mm-hmm. I didn't got
So
your question.
theoretically,
Can
one
you
IP
please
address.
see
So
one?
every IP address.
So I will repeat your question. You are asking me one IP address is assigned to all the users, correct? And all users might use different services. Right? Some user are using HTTP, and the other users might also use HTTP at the same time. Correct?
Yes. No, not like that, sir. Um, so single person might need more than one port, no, sir. So 64,000 people can't use the IP address at the same time. Theoretically, that's what I'm asking.
So you are not connected to a physical port. See, I'm not asking you for a physical port. The port numbers are the port number TCP and UDP port numbers. You remember in OSI layer we have
Yes, sir. Yes,
studied.
sir. I remember, sir.
So port numbers are something logical port numbers. They will identify the logical port numbers. Like if I'm doing HTTP, then the port number will be what? It will be assigned to port number 80. Telnet will be assigned to port number 23. Correct?
Yes, sir.
So that is something
But
the
my question is,
this thing. Yes.
an ISP uses 50.1.1.1, and the ISP has like 60,000 customers. So theoretically, it can't use the same IP address, no, sir. Even though it can't assume that one customer might need only one port. So that's what I'm asking, sir. The customer can use multiple ports simultaneously.
Yes, it
They
can
might
use
also have
multiple
multiple
ports
users in their
simultaneously.
houses. So
Yes, they can use multiple ports
so
simultaneously.
theoretically we can never have the number of users as number of ports. That's what I'm asking. Because ports are basically services and not the users.
Yes, ports are basically services.
So even though for a laptop one IP address is enough, but multiple ports are required.
Yes, port numbers will be different. One IP address will be enough for one user. One user means one IP address.
Yes,
If
sir,
I'm
that was my
saying
doubt.
if I'm saying 1.1, then it will only need one public IP address. It will only need one public IP address. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now IP NAT inside source, I will say list number is 2 and pool name is CCCC, and I have to give one command over here. Over here I have to give one command, overload. If I give this command, my one IP address will be overloaded on all the private IP addresses. Okay, just have to give two different commands. I have to say the start and end IP as same, and over here I have to give one command, overload. Okay, so if I go and if I check show IP NAT translation, I'm not having any translation. I'll go on PC6 and I will say ping. Okay. Now what I will do, this is my ISP's router R2. What I will do, config terminal. See, I will be not using in the scenario, I will be not using telnet, but what I am showing you, line VTY 0,4. If I want to use telnet, password will be Cisco at the time of login and transport input telnet. Okay, I have configured a telnet command on my ISP's router. Now what I will do, I will go on my PC telnet 200.1.1.100. So here the telnet is not supported. Telnet is not supported on this VPC. So we can check this thing NAT translations, so IP NAT translations. So okay, I will say ping. See, I have got the translation. I got the IP address 50.1.1.1. If I go on PC5 and if I ping, I will get the same IP address. So if I go on the router, if I check show IP NAT translation, see over here, these are my 1.1 and the below one are my 1.2, but it got same IP address, same public IP address 50.1.1.1. Understood? Whether I am going to any of the server, I will be getting the same public IP address. I will be getting the same public IP address whether I am going to any of the server over the internet. Got it?
So I guess the question you was asking was whether it's getting one public IP address with the services that it's using. Users, is it 50, like 60,000 users can be assigned the same public IP address, or services, or 60,000 services will be shared among um, the users? That
No, that is not about
for
the services. It is not about the services, Dade. See, at a time,
I think that's,
60,000
yeah,
users,
it's not about the
60,000.
services. Yeah, I know. I just wanted
Do you have any doubt or you were just explaining the things?
to.
You were
No
confirming?
doubt. I'm just saying that the 60,000 users. Yes, that is 60,000 users, regardless of the services that they are using. 60,000 IP, same IP will be assigned for 60,000 users.
Yes, 60,000 users. Same IP can be assigned to 60,000 users. Understood now? Any doubt, guys?
Yes.
No, sir.
So we'll stop over here.